Right. Whoa. Hee-haw. That's crazy. You're going to have to fix that. I can't stand talking in the tunnel there. So, anyway, everybody have a good week? Are you going to have a good one this week? Does anybody know how to make this thing stay on my head? Super. That would work, actually. Staples, yeah. That's all right. Golly. Doggone. All righty. Well, good. We'll see how that works. So, anyway. I started, it's kind of weird because last week I didn't get to preach, which was good. And so it was good for me. It was probably good for y'all. At least nobody said amen. So, and then the second service I did, but I just didn't want to start because I got some stuff to do. We're talking about, struggles and making it through struggles in our life. And so today we're talking about compassion. That's something that we don't have a lot of these days, you know? I mean, seriously, it seems like the more we get older and the more things that go around the world, we just have a lot less compassion for people, for things, and just for the world in itself, and not compassion. We don't have a lot of compassion for sinners either in the church. We like to just to be non-compassionate and just let them go on their own way, and we don't want to commingle with them and stuff because somebody might see us with that sinner. Well, trust me, if they see you with anybody, they see you with a sinner, or they're with you and you're a sinner. And so we get into that place of just less and less compassion, and we see, and then when you start looking at the stuff going on in the world, we see the somebody killing somebody, whatever, and it's not even doesn't even bother us anymore. We see beheadings take place, and we just distance ourselves from it and say, well, at least it wasn't me. And in the Christian world, we've got to the place that we're like, I'm saved, I got mine, now you get yours. However you can get it. I'm not going to help you. And so we need to just really realize that when we look at things that happen in the world, that in Nigeria there was 200 missing girls that were abducted. It was in the news for about a week. They still haven't been found. And so we're like, okay, well, so it's not on the headline news, then we don't have to pay attention to it. There was the plane with 300 people that mysteriously disappeared. And that was big news for about maybe 2 weeks. And now we don't think about it because that's old news. And how many of us that probably were praying for them to be found or to be found alive that now it's not even in our radar? It's the same thing with the Nigerian girls, that they are gone, and because they're not on our radar anymore, then we don't have to have compassion for it. We don't have to worry about it. We have millions of people that are lost, but because we're saved, we don't really have to worry about it. Chris and Sarah are here, the missionaries to Taiwan, and there are such a need for Christ over there. I mean, it's like a vacuum with no Christianity. There's tons of religion, but no Christianity. But yet we don't even know that that's one of the most un-Christian places in the world. And because it's not on our radar, we don't think about it. But thank God, God put compassion in people's hearts. He put compassion in Sarah and Chris's heart for Taiwan. And it doesn't matter if they make the news or whatever, but they're committed to it. We as believers, I don't know if we have, I just have to ask, what do we have passion for, if anything? And what do we have compassion for? I mean, yeah, when the little puppy falls in the well, yeah, we got compassion about that. When you see that animals are abused, and I hate to see that, we have compassion for that. We'll cry over a little dog getting run over, but we got Christians being murdered over in Iraq and Iran and in Egypt, by the way, and we won't shed a tear. We've become a non-compassionate people. We've become, I believe, a non-compassionate nation. And it's not getting any better. Christ said the most important thing is to love the Lord and to love your neighbors yourself. If you can get these things two right. But we've become to a place that the only thing we want to love is ourselves or something that will get us ahead. We see the little children on the TV that they're raising money for. Feed the children. Most of us should really look to what we support, because many times ministries, or whatever you want to call them, they have a passion, but it's usually for their pockets. Very few, I do understand that ministries have to have operating capital. But it's a shame when the majority of the operating capital goes into the people that are doing the operating. And we want to feel good about having compassion because it makes us feel like we're good people. It makes us feel good if we shed a tear over that kid that's bloated because he's not had food and got flies flying around him. And they're putting this picture on there for you to raise money, to send money to them, which is going to go to the fat guy behind the camera and the organization who's fat and well-fed. That's a pretty neat word. So anyway, and we don't think about it. We're in the Christian world, we become McPassion. McCompassion. We'll be real quick. We want it now. We want it quick. We don't want to have to worry about it. We want to get it and then go on and not have to think about it anymore. University of Michigan did a comprehensive study of 14,000 students between 1979 and 2009. It showed a sharp decline in empathy. Basically, it says that we care 40% less than people did in the 1980s. We just don't care. I tried sometimes to understand people or friends by looking at their perspective. And I often have a tender and concerned feelings about those that are less fortunate than me. Fewer people are calling ourselves soft-hearted because misfortunes don't bother us anymore. And we're all guilty. We're all guilty. We see someone is struggling, and we want to put a bandage on it and say, okay, that's fixed it. I don't have to deal with it anymore. Or we have somebody that is going through a struggle, and they say, pray for me. Oh yeah, I'll put that on my prayer list, and then they go away. I've got to where usually somebody says, pray for me. I say, well, let's do it now. Let's just go ahead and do it on there. The truth of the matter is people don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. And unfortunately, in the Christian world, compassion is dying for other people. For church itself, because we've become in a, it's like the sport of the Greeks. My colony is better than your colony. My church is bigger than your church. We want to build the kingdom, but only in our castle. And we see that the things, and I have to say this because this is props and it's encouraging. You know, we have had a struggle with transportation from the people from Fifth Street, and I've promised these guys, I said, we're going to have transportation. And it's been 2 weeks that I've tried and failed, and I just was praying to God. I came in here and I said, God, you gotta do something. We've got to be able to get people that want to come to the church, that want to be with Christians and have their lives changed and turned around and built up. I can't do it. I don't have the money. The church don't have the money, but yet you've got a plan, and I need an answer. And one thing, and I'm not saying this to be mean, rude, or whatever, but when you're in a ministry or you have a ministry, the last place you're going to get support is from other ministries. Trust me. It just doesn't happen. But I was praying, and the Lord said, Cornerstone over there, they've got a big bus sitting there, and it's just kind of sitting there. And I know Grover. Grover's a good guy. We're friends. And I just called him up and said, hey, Grover, here's the situation. He said, sure, come get the keys. And so, he's just letting us use it. Yeah. Cornerstone Christian Academy, Cornerstone Church, visit them. It's okay, because I really do care about building the kingdom, not building a castle. And most people don't like to invite people, to other church functions in another church that you don't go to because they're afraid that they'll end up going there. Okay, what's the problem? If God leads them, then we should support it. We don't own God's people. And God will use us for a season, for a reason. He may keep us there forever, or He may move us to build His kingdom. Drop in compassion to coincide with the rise of social media and technology. We get to the place that we see the struggles and the pains and stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, technology is a great thing. I use Facebook as a ministry tool because I know what's going on. I find out what's going on. I know who to pray for. I find out, those type of things. Also, I have people at church. It allows me to minister to them immediately. And so there's some good things about it, but the other thing about it is it's we call it a social media, but actually they ought to call it an anti-social media, because what it does, it prevents us from going face to face. These things are a blessing and a curse. Yesterday, in my phone, I don't know what the deal is with it, but it's been acting like crazy, and it won't charge very well. I had charge plugged up all night, and it was up to 3%. Woo! So I was talking to some friends of mine. I said, listen, I just can't, get on the phone really and stuff, because when your phone dies, and, I said we could do it like we used to. Is what you would do is you'd pull over and use a payphone. There's a problem with that nowadays. You can't find a payphone. Some of the markets you can go into, and they'll have one, and you have to pay for the payphone and stuff like that. But The truth of the matter is that we don't even remember people's phone numbers. Just a question. Nobody looking. Who knows my cell phone number? By heart, without looking. Yeah. Two people. Remember when we had to do this? You had to know the number. Or you had a book like this beside your phone and you would look up Auntie Boo Boo. Or you'd write it down. And then the other thing about it is we actually had to choose when that phone rang to pick it up. Because you didn't know who was on the other side, and you figure if it was a phone call, then it was probably important. And so you would take it. Those things have made us antisocial. We've got to the place that I can do all the social things I want to do and never leave my house by sitting here on the phone. But you know, there's something special about human relationships and being able to sit down with someone and be able to put your arm around someone when they're struggling. Being able to tell them that you love them in face to face. We are become more obsessed by ourselves than we have anything else. Well, I don't know that we have time to deal with it. Social media increases the amount of dopamine into the body. 80% of it is used directly related to a person's body, rewarding them for focusing on themselves. Dopamine. It's a chemical in your body that makes you feel good. There's a reason they call it dopamine, because it's dope. I mean, you know. And so when we get into that thing, we feel good. It makes us feel good. The overwhelming exposure to tragedy desensitizes us. I mentioned this last week about 911 at that, or 9/11 in 2000, whatever, that we saw compassion really begin to well out in America because we saw as a nation being attacked, and we took it personal. And we saw thousands, 3,000 plus people die. And for about 6 weeks, it doesn't matter if you were a Republican, a Democrat, if you were a Christian or an atheist, it seemed like compassion and caring was welling up in America. And I was excited thinking, wow, this needs to continue. So we need to focus on loving each other instead of loving the things of the world and the positions and the power and all those other things. Unfortunately, it lasted for about 6 weeks. And now it's kind of uglier than ever. Lack of personal interaction makes it easier not to care. It really does. Because you don't have to go. And you know, some people have a tender heart. And my daughter, I love her as much as anybody can love anybody, but I forbid her to go to the animal shelter. We have 6 dogs now. And only one of them was one that I chose. And I'd like to get rid of it. If anybody knows, anybody needs some dogs. They're all big dogs too. But I love them all. But my daughter, she has great compassion. She goes in there and she'll see, it's the interaction that makes her. She can look online, it doesn't make you as caring. Many of us go to the hospital and we walk by the rooms and I try to walk by the rooms and just say a little prayer for them as I go, because you see people that are struggling, you see people that are hurting. We need to care more about people. Caring, and I want you to get this. Caring is not clicking like on a post. I was with my buddies, one of my buddies Friday, and it was his birthday like Thursday. He says, man, he says, I see you didn't send me a happy birthday on my Facebook page. I said, no, but I clicked like for someone else that did. That's the same thing, right? I'm just saying dittos. I agree with you. Happy birthday. No, I had to buy his lunch that day to let him know I really cared. But we just get into that place that it's easier not to have to interact with people. And then I'm going to say a statement, and you guys don't kill me about it, but doctors say the same thing. Doctors say being a doctor would be great if it wasn't for the people. Church is the same way. Church would be great if it wasn't for the people. But if it wasn't for the people, we wouldn't need a church. Christ said, I didn't come for those that were perfectly well. I come for those that needed a doctor. And that's what we're supposed to do. To say you care but don't act is just to say you don't care. Seriously. Mark 1:40-41 says this, and I'm using the NLT, so it'll be a little bit different than probably what's up there, but that's okay. A man with leprosy came and he knelt in front of Jesus and he begged to be healed. And he says, if you are willing, you can heal me and make me clean. And he said, moved with compassion, Jesus was moved with compassion, and Jesus reached out and he touched him. And he said, I'm willing. He said, be healed. With compassion, he touched the man with leprosy, which was a death sentence in that day pretty much, and you were put in a colony and separated, sort of like they do with Ebola now, sort of. But yet, he was willing to touch the sick person. Many of us don't want to touch the sick person. Many of us don't want to deal with the sin person. We only want to deal with the saved person because it requires nothing. But Jesus says if you want to show compassion, you're going to have to touch somebody. You're going to have to interact with somebody face to face, skin to skin, to say, I love you and I care about you. Again, you can tell people how much you care, but until there's action to back that up, it really has no effect. There are empty churches today. There are churches like ours that could be filled to overflowing that people don't come up because someone that said they were a Christian and that they loved God didn't have compassion for their circumstance or their situation. Listen, we're all in the same deal, and the struggle is that we want to measure sin and say, okay, God grades sin. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Here's the sins, okay? God grades them, and this sin is worse than the other. And so if you're in that sin and you're in number 1, I'm in number 11, I feel better about myself because I'm not that big of a sinner as you are. That makes me feel good about myself. So I can talk junk about your sin, but listen, your sin's no different. People give up on God. They walk away from church because people want to grade your sin. And in grading your sin, which is judging, it says, judge not lest you be judged. It says, if you don't forgive, you won't be forgiven. I've got a pastor friend of mine that, yes, he made some mistakes, but no more mistakes than you will make this week. But was ostracized not just by his church, but by every church for 13 years. If he would show up in church, The pastor, knowing his past, knowing what he'd been through, would automatically switch into a sermon that was directed at him to make him feel like he was going straight to hell. And he loved God. Compassion says, I don't care what your sin is. I don't care what your struggle is. I'm going to accept you exactly where you're at, because here's the deal, guys. Not one of us is a less sinner than the other. I mean, we're not. And whenever we look at stuff, and you know, I had a person, tell me, he says, did you hear what happened at this church? I said, no, I didn't hear what happened. Well, this happened. I said, well, I don't want to hear it. We need to pray. That's what we need to do. We don't need to go spread the stuff that they said happened, and you have no personal, what's the word I'm looking for? Experience with it or whatever, and yet we want to spread it because, well, somebody said it and it was happened in the church. It must be true. No, it must not be true. It might be true, whatever. But regardless if it's true or not, we as believers are called to give compassion. It says in Galatians 6, if you find a brother or sister that's caught up in a fault, you that are righteous, or you that are walking in victory in your walk with Christ right now, restore them to their faith with gentleness and meekness, lest you find yourself in the same thing. When you can't do that, you don't have compassion. If you know something that somebody has told you that's gossip, that you have no idea whether it's true or not, and you spread that, I'm going to tell you something. You don't have compassion. Because compassion says, I could be there. Very easily I could be there. So I can either throw more coals onto the fire and stoke that thing up, or I can show the love of Christ, which will quench the fires and restore people. How many people today that you know need restoration from the church or from Christians? Because they messed up one time and nobody else will ever give them another chance. Golly. Well, I hope my time's about up. Compassion says that regardless who comes into your life, however they come into your life, doesn't mean you need to be questionable about them. Jesus never questioned anybody that came into his life. When they came a part of his life, he never said, hey, well, let's talk before you come here. He did say stuff like, well, drop your nets and come and follow me. He did say, go, you've been healed. He did those type of things. He didn't say, hey, let's slow down here. You're coming into my life and I'm like, there's something about being wise. Don't be crazy, but, But at some point, if we say we're Christians, then we have to believe we're Christians, and then we have to treat people like Christians and not go worrying about what they past was like or what they did or whatever. Because at that point, it puts us in God's position to judge their situation or their things. Lord knows I've been judged a lot. And probably rightfully so, to be honest with you. Ask me if I care. You know I don't. And if Miss Vanessa here, she would tell you. But to care is to accept at face value who the person is or who the person says they are, and to love them until they prove you wrong. And even if they prove you wrong, you still love them. You may have to change the status of your relationship, but you still love them. My dad was he was rough, and we'd be talking about something. I know I've shared this before, but we would go back to a time when he was 6 years old and got a fight with somebody. And then he would start turning red and start thinking about it. I should have, and just getting crazy upset about it. I'm like, dude, Dad, please, come on. The dude's dead, man. Please, chill out. You were 6 years old, And I worry, you need to have compassion, chill out. God's okay. It says in Matthew 20:34, it said, Jesus had compassion on them and he touched their eyes. Again, he had compassion and he touched them. And immediately they regained their sight. You can say you have compassion, but if you're not touching someone, it's in vain. And I don't mean you got to, give them hugs and all that other stuff. When touching them, I mean you're going to touch their life because you're going to show the love of Jesus Christ that he showed you, and lives will change. I was really struggling years and years ago. I don't know how many years ago because I don't remember stuff, but it was years ago. And I had really just gotten tired. I was wore out as a pastor. And the struggles were great, and I was struggling, and I'm like, I think I'd be better off. Let me just go back into the corporate world. Because I don't have to worry about everybody. I have to worry about me and doing my job. And if I can just focus on my job, I can do a great job because I've always been super successful in corporate world because I didn't have to worry about other people. If I did, they worked for me, not above me. And I went and saw the company that I worked for whenever I started Horizon Church. And they had always told me, say, hey, if you ever decide to make a change, call us back. We'd love to have you. And so I told Becky, I said, I really want to, look at this because, I'm tired. And as I was driving there, praying to the Lord, he spoke to me. He says, Charles, if you want to take this job, take it. He said, I'll bless it because you've been faithful. Now, some people may question if that was God, but trust me, I know that it was. And so I went and sat down with him, and great deal. I wasn't going to have to work all over the country anymore. It was just going to be, I had like Greensboro to Hickory was my territory. That's awesome if you're a sales rep. And they made me they told me what my base salary was going to be, and it was 6 figures. I'm like, wow, that would sure be a relief after all these years to get back to making that. And I had already made up my mind that, but they said this, here's the deal though, you have to give up being a pastor. I'm not saying you have to quit being a Christian or not go to church. I'm saying you have to give up being a pastor because we're paying so much, we demand a lot, and we want you to focus 100% on what we're doing. And you can't do that as a pastor. I said, I knew that was the deal going in. And so they'd made me the offer. I was happy. I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. This is good. And as I was walking out, the owner of the company said, hey, he called me Chaz. Hey, Chaz, come here. Big Italian guy. And I think they were, hey, I'm going to do a good deal for you. But great people. And come here, I want you to meet somebody. So he's in his office talking to this guy, and he says, hey, I want you to meet somebody. I want you to meet Chaz, man. This guy was the greatest rep we ever had. Man, he was awesome. Nobody made more money. This guy was incredible. And the guy said, well, what do you do now? I said, I'm a pastor. And my boss said that, he says, no, he's not. He says, this guy changes people's lives. I'm like, I wish you wouldn't have said that. And I'm gonna get to a closing point with this. But anyway, I'm like, you shouldn't have said that, because now I'm having to choose. I felt like it was a test that I had to choose. God says I can do it. He'll bless it. And then the boss says, well, he's not a pastor. He changes people's lives. And then I tried to put the thing together in my mind that if I'm not a pastor, I'm not changing people's lives, but I'm a good guy and I can make a lot of money and I can bless the church and those type of things. So I was like, all the way home, I was like, gosh, why did that happen? And so I get home, and many of you do or don't know Wendy Scott. Wendy's the type of lady, she's filled with the Spirit of God, and God talks to her, and if he tells her something, she ain't going to keep it, if it's about you especially. So I get home, and when I get home, the phone rings. I said, Pastor Charles? Yeah. It's Wendy. She said, what's going on with you? I said, well, I'm trying to decide what color. I got to do some painting in the house and stuff. I was, trying to pick out some paint. And so she said, no, don't go there. She says, that ain't it. She says, for 3 days, the Lord's had you on my heart, and he's telling me you got something to do, make a decision, whatever, and you need to tell me what's going on. I said, well, here's the deal. And I told her about the offer and everything else. And here's what she said. She said, you want to know what the Lord just told me? I said, please. He told me that if you want the job, to take it, because he will bless it, because you've been faithful. And I'm like, okay, God keeps telling me I can, but then I keep hearing he changes people's lives. And this is not, please, this is not to build me up. I'm messed up as anybody. But I had to weigh that out and say, what is more important in my life? Yes, it would be a huge blessing for me to get back to making the income that I used to make, to provide for my family, to have cars that don't break down all the time, and to to be able to do stuff and actually go on a vacation again and those type of things. I thought about that, and my wife she says, well, what did they offer you? And I told her. She says, yep, that's what the Lord told me. So, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to take it? I said, I got to pray about it, because I've got this struggle. And I told him what Don said, and I just you have to weigh these things out. And trust me, guys, that's been years and years and years ago. But there's days I wish I'd have taken it. Because being a Christian is not a cakewalk. And just because you are doesn't mean that everything is going to go your way 100% of the time. It doesn't mean that every time you touch something, it's going to blow up and be good. Sometimes you're going to touch something that's going to mess up and be bad, and you're going to be challenged. And it's going to test you to the core of who you are. Then you've got to get back on course. How many people have a GPS in their car or in their phone? Everybody has it. If you got a phone, you got one. You may not know it, but you do. I was thinking about that word GPS and this global positioning system, which tells where you are all the time and tells you how to get somewhere. And I began to think about it, and I feel like God said, well, the GPS is really nothing more than God's plan of salvation. And right here's our GPS. It does the same thing as the Holy Spirit does when we are going down the road and we know we're going in a path, but then we get on the wrong path and we're going the wrong way. The GPS will say, when you can, or whatever, I don't even know what it says anymore, please make a U-turn. And we have an option to follow that GPS, because the GPS will get us to our destination if we will follow it. But if we don't, then we get lost. And it's the same thing with us and the Lord. God's given us a GPS. He's given us His plan of salvation. He's told us what to do, how to do. He never said that the road wouldn't be bumpy or there wouldn't be trouble, there wouldn't be struggle, there'd be strife. Listen, loving God is a tough deal. Remember, Jesus asked Peter, Peter, do you love me? He said, yeah, I love you. He says, Peter, do you love me? He says, Lord, I love you. He says, Peter, do you love me unconditionally above everything else? He says, Lord, you know I love you. He said, feed my sheep. Feed my sheep. You can't say, and I mean this with all my heart, that you love God, that you love Christ, and you can't have compassion for a person. We have to slow down and realize that Jesus, when He landed, saw a large crowd, and He had compassion on them, and He healed their sick. Every time we see Jesus' healing, it's always accompanied with compassion. And that's the keys to the kingdom. If you can have compassion for another person in their struggles, no matter where they're at, no matter what they've done, no matter what they're doing, and you can say, listen, I've been there. None of us are perfect. Christ loves you and I love you too. Then we can see the world change. Where Jesus went, He had interruptions. He went to resting to a quiet place where He couldn't eat. He saw a crowd. He taught them. He was on His way to heal a dying girl. He was interrupted. There's a woman that was sick for 12 years, and she touched His garment, and He was interrupted. And there had a friend that was sick, and they opened up the roof and laid him down, and Jesus got interrupted. It was inconvenient. But many of us don't want to be inconvenienced for Christ. I mean, seriously. But yet, He was inconvenienced for us. That while we were yet sinners, He loved us. And He gave His life for us. My challenge this week is to begin to look at people, circumstances, and situations through the eyes of Christ. To have compassion and true compassion. Listen, it doesn't mean that you don't ever get irritated or frustrated and those type of things. But compassion can overcome those things. I believe, and I could be wrong, that there is a point in each and every one of our lives that we've been through that there was a time that we needed somebody to be compassionate with us. Well, they're having a party, ain't they? And we didn't get it. And those type of things are wounds that are so hard to heal. Let's go to the Lord. Father, I thank You that You are a mighty and wonderful God. Lord, I just pray that today You'll help us to take a circumstance or situation that we may be dealing with right now, just to take the opportunity to show compassion. for someone that we don't think needs it, or someone that doesn't deserve it. But Lord, you did it with us. You had compassion on us, and you sent your Son to die for us. And your word said there's no greater love than one that will lay down his life for another. So Lord, thank you for loving us, saving us. In Jesus' name.
You know, a couple of years ago, it was real popular for everyone to have bracelets that